Hello and good morning, everybody. My name's James and I'm a 16-year-old 3D printer enthusiast and student currently in Sheffield. My first 3D printer experience was at school and I was very intrigued by its possibilities. So this morning in my talk, I hope to cover how I started from scratch, not knowing anything about 3D printing. Then moving on to projects I've made. So that's predominantly using the 3D printer. And then finally onto my future aspirations. So starting from scratch. So when I'm reading through these, keep in mind that I didn't know anything at the start. I saw a 3D printer and thought, wow, that's a cool bit of kit. So I purchased my first printer back in 2017. This was an Annette A8. So during the course of this talk, I'll be holding up small placards like this. This will help you to understand some of the brand names that I say, because none of them are standard English. This was a self-assembly kit. It was cheap and easy to assemble, so this is perfect for beginners and also helps you understand how the machine actually works. I've really enjoyed using this printer because it's really fun and simple to use. The buttons on the front help you to understand and go through all the screens that you need to and operate the printer with relative ease for someone that doesn't know anything at the start, so i.e. me. So for my software, I use Microsoft's 3D Builder. This was okay, but you use basic shapes like cuboids and spheres to make really, really simple designs. So it obviously has its limitations. So then I moved on to using a program called SolidWorks. This is amazing because it can handle really, really detailed designs and complex ideas that you have. And you can also animate things and really show off your designs to employers or just print them straight out. However, once you've designed something, you then need to make a file that your printer can actually understand. For this, you need a slicer. So I use Cura. This software imports your file that you've created, and then it slices it into thin layers that you define the height of. And it exports a G code, which is the language of the 3D printer, if you like. So talking filaments, predominantly I use 2 filaments, but of course this list is endless. There are so many different possibilities out there today. It's amazing, and I haven't had a chance to experience them all because I've got relatively cheap printers, but I'm sure you can have lots of fun. So the most useful filament I currently use is PLA, mainly because it's cheap and it's very, very simple to use. It's strong and biodegradable as it's made of cornstarch. Here is an example of some glow-in-the-dark filament. Of course, it's not dark, so you can't really see it glowing, unfortunately. And I've also got an example of some heat change PLA. So when a lighter is held near it, it changes color. And it will return to its original color after the heat has gone away. That's been really interesting for me. Since getting into 3D printing, it had been 2 years after getting my first printer, and I was looking into other printers, and I saw a brand called G-Tech and saw that A20M could dual extrude, therefore meaning I could print 2 filament colors at the same time. This has been really interesting because it's made my ideas literally change color. It's supposed to be black and white, a simple color, or painting it afterwards. You can design your colors into your model, which has been amazing to experience. Here is an example of a fade color from orange to green on this little Labrador I did ages ago. This printer also has a very, very large build volume. So this is perfect for anyone that wants to upgrade their build size so they have a little bit more space to play with. However, on this machine, there is only one button and it is a control knob. So you can operate this with one hand, which I found really useful. So when you're trying to unblock the nozzle and things like that, you can just have one hand and to heat the extruder and no worries, no pressing around, fiddling with buttons, thinking, oh no, which one have I clicked? It's really, really simple and intuitive to use. Much more recently, I've been getting into 3D scanning. So for this, I use an Xbox Kinect sensor mounted on a custom handhold. And I also use the software called ScanEct. So this software inputs the signal coming from the Kinect sensor via this cable, and then it can use the sensors and cameras on the front of the sensor to see where an object is and then scan it by using little waypoints and then stitch them all together at the end. This has been really, really good for me because you can scan almost anything. You can scan houses, you can scan rooms, you can scan small objects, and you can scan people, which has been really amusing, actually. I would highly recommend scanning. It's brilliant. And with any 3D printer, there are additions. If you're buying cheaper 3D printers, that by no means that means low end, but cheaper printers. So my G-Tech was about £300, and there are two main upgrades that I've done to this that have revolutionized how it works. The first one of those was a bed leveling probe. So this allows the printer to understand where it is currently on the build plate. So you can auto level it. So click a little button, it will go around dropping this probe at set points on the bed to measure how far away it is. And then it could factor this into the print so that your first layer that it puts down is perfect every time. So there's no fiddling around with screwdrivers or anything to try and lift your bed up. It's a really simple solution, but requires a little bit of firmware changing. But if I can do it, I'm sure anyone can. So talking about firmware, the second thing I did to this printer was upgrade the Marlin firmware. This involves plugging the printer into my computer and using the Arduino IDE software to change the code slightly. This is free open source on GitHub, and you can download all the firmware that you'd ever need there. It's really, really good. This has allowed me to read the files a lot quicker on the printer and also improve the print quality. Moving on to the Annette Printer, I've had to do a lot more modifications to this because as this was self-assembly, there are obviously quite a few problems with it. The first of which was the spool holder I put on top because the direct drive motor here was struggling to pull the filament in. So this was a very simple solution. You just screw it into the back. A very, very simple little project for anyone starting out. The second thing I did was have a fan mounted to the power supply. This has been really useful because the power supply originally overheated. So this could cause a fire risk. And of course, nobody wants a fire in their house. Also here, I've 3D printed a motherboard cover. So this is where the brains of the computer lives. And all the wires going from every single component go into here. So when I'm doing maintenance, I don't want to have my fingers anywhere near that. So I've kept all the cables nice and tidy within this little supply mount there. However, there has been a recent addition to it, which was a glass bed. This for the first few weeks, this has been amazing. The first layer stuck down perfectly every time, and it improves your finish on the bottom layer to honestly like glass. It's amazing. However, one very, very important note to note is do not prise your prints off the bed because you do run the risk of snapping the bed. So please do use a spatula and do not leave it. Otherwise, you'll do exactly what I did and end up going to A&E, which hasn't been a fun week for me, to be honest. So yeah, learn from me, don't leave her. So moving on to projects I've made with the printers, the first of which was a filament rack. So when you get into 3D printing, you use these things called spools. These are these circular shapes here. These carry your filaments, and I predominantly use kilogram spools. When you get into 3D printing, you quickly realize that you need a lot of space because you collect a lot of these spools, whether that be loads of different colors or loads of different materials. So for this project, I used a wooden subframe with metal support bars and 3D printed end caps. As you can see, the little colors in there, they are individual 3D printed triangles, which I press fitted into place. This project was really fun for me because I was able to understand the technology of press fit as opposed to gluing things in that are permanent. So that's always been good fun. More recently, I've been working on a project in school, which is a 3D printer enclosure. So the 3D printer sits inside here and is heated up by the heater fan at the back and controlled by the little support at the front. The main idea behind this is I struggle in a cold house with getting my first layer down. And the print quality, both of which are quite hard to get anywhere. So having an external heater also helps the 3D printer to maintain a constant temperature, therefore no warping. So that's where your print starts to lift off the bed when it's going, and that can cause it to fail. That can stop the warping happening, and it's a really, really good idea. You can either make one yourself for relatively cheap. The running cost for that is currently about £100, which isn't too bad compared to online ones, or you can buy acrylic boxes for them, which I would highly recommend. A few years back, I made this design, which was a 3D printed and metal reinforced lamp. So I 3D printed a top shroud that lights up when it is turned on. And you can see the clear filament there was really, really useful for this project. And it also has a little storage base at the bottom. This is perfect for all the SD cards that you get. You can store them in there. I currently have this next to my printer, so I have all my little tools and things that I need safely stored in there. I also designed and made this heated bottle. So this runs off your cigarette lighter in your car, so that's 12 volts, and has a little power LED to show when it's heating up. So inside here, there is a little filament, a wrap of filament that is heating up, not 3D printer filament, but a heating filament. So that is screwed in and bolted safe. This 3D printed bottom part, I did several iterations of. So I took an iterative design approach. This meant that I printed several ideas and printed them all out and thought which one fitted my criteria best. So I tried to keep it as far away from the surface it was resting on so that less heat was dissipated and it would keep the drinker hot. And also was thick enough so that if you could hold it here and not burn yourself. I've also been experimenting with the idea of Lithophanes. If you don't know what a lithophane is, essentially the basic concept is you take an image and you can 3D print it. So this was a family picture that was taken a few years ago, and I submitted it into a software and it produces a 3D file that you can then go and print, and then this is what you get. So it works on the basis of light passing through it depicts different colors. So since I printed in white filament, the more light going through depicts white. So thicker areas are white, and the thinner areas, as shown there, it's very, very, very thin, approximately, what's that, 1/10 of a millimeter. That is for the darker areas, so the darker area of this jacket. And of course, you can do all sorts of different shapes. Here is a curved piece. However, this one didn't turn out quite as well because I accidentally reversed the colors, so the darker areas are now really thin and the thicker areas that are supposed to be white are of course very thick. So that hasn't worked out very well. As you can see, you can't really see the image there, but of course it's all part of the learning process. So when designing, you usually come up with a problem. Someone asks you something or you find a problem in day-to-day life. So for this next project, my problem was trying to entertain my brother while on long journeys. And of course, when with all these modern devices now, you can sit down when you're on long journeys with your neck in this position for long periods of time. And that is not good for your physical health because you can strain your neck muscles. So I was tasked with making a support to hold this Nintendo Switch. So this is what I came up with. This is a small mount that the Nintendo Switch slots in without any bolts or anything. It just press fits in and then slides onto the top of your seat with these bars go through there. So this is really simple to install. That was the idea, so my brother could do it himself. And also has a pivot in there so that you can orientate it to face any of the 3 seats. And there is a picture of it actually in action. Going back to 3D scanning, here is a model that I scanned of my brother. This came out really, really well. Although to note something, there was, as you can see, this is low poly, which means you can see all these little polygon shapes that the print is made out of. This is because I haven't purchased the full software. So this means I'm limited to 5,000 polygons. However, if you were to buy the software for $130, then you would get unlimited polygons. So your prints would come out exactly how you scanned them, which is amazing. I might get into that. And since opening my business, 3D Print Create, I've enabled people to send things to me, send parts that is, and I can 3D print them for them. This has been really, really good fun for me because I've met so many different people all across the world who want things making, things designing, and it's let me gauge a point in the community of where things are needed, what parts are needed. So I've made parts for remote control things, made key rings, I've made all sorts of things, and I hope to meet more people in the future. So if that's something you're interested in, then please feel free to email me or ask me at the end of the talk. So in the future, I aspire to a career in electrical engineering. So whether this be a degree apprenticeship or university, I'm not quite sure yet. And I'm currently working on a 3D printer design of my own. This is the start of it, essentially. So I've got a PC fan at the top that is currently cooling an Arduino board. So this is an open source board which you can program, and as I was talking earlier, the Arduino IDE I'm using to program this. It will have a CNC shield over the top of it and CNC motor drivers, so that I can operate the X, Y, and Z motors that make up a 3D printer. So I've thoroughly enjoyed my 3D printing experience so far, and I would greatly recommend it to anyone that hasn't already started. It's a really amazing journey. And I would also like to thank 3D Crowd for their amazing support that they've given me over this pandemic time. And if you have any questions or queries, feel free to contact me through my Instagram page at 3D Print Create. And just before I finish, it's most important for me to say that don't be scared of things that go wrong. I've had numerous problems. I've had a small fire on my printer. That was honestly my fault, but still, it was a problem. We've had numerous failed prints. We've had spooling. We've unspooled a spool. We've dropped it, and it's wasted, what, 20 quid a filament. You have problems, and it's all about a learning process. So I started not knowing anything, and I've just bought a printer and started learning. The more experience you get with your printer, the more you understand about it, and then the more effectively you can use it. So please don't worry if things go wrong. It's all natural, and that's how you can tweak settings, you can learn things that you otherwise wouldn't have known. And today it may have seemed like a strange collection that I've shown you of things that I've made, but I was hoping to inspire you. Almost anything is possible to create on a 3D printer. You can let your ideas come to life. The only thing limiting you is your imagination. And if I can do it, I'm sure anyone can. Thank you so much for listening. And if there's any questions, I'm free to take them now.
Well, thanks very much, James. So we've got our first question from Tony. He says, nicely presented. That ANET seems a bit of a minefield with the fire risk, exposed PCB, and glass bed. For the 3D scanning, did the Xbox 360 have a special adapter for PC?
Yes, so you, as you can see on the scanner there, that is not actually USB. It has a little notch in it, but you can buy a converter off eBay or Amazon for about £6 that you plug into the wall, and there's a USB going into your computer, and then you're away. That's literally it.
Great. So we've got another question from Pete. Would you recommend people get started the same way that you did?
I would certainly recommend it because I didn't know anything about it. I knew the basic concepts, X, Y, and Z movement, and then it magically does it. So I'd recommend getting a cheap printer to start, because if you end up hating it, and that I'm sure you won't, but even if you did, a cheap printer and self-assembly, that's been really good for me. If you're minded like that and want to create something of your own, that's perfect. If you'd like, for example, the G-Tech, that comes as a 3-part kit, so you only have to screw 3 parts together. So if you're more inclined to do small DIY than a whole project that'll take you approximately a few days, then I'd go with the G-Tech. However, I strongly stand by that Annette is a great printer. You need to do a few modifications, of course, 3D print certain parts for it, but I would highly recommend it. Thingiverse has provided me with loads of parts for it. It's been brilliant. So I definitely recommend the way I've taken, to be fair.
Thanks. So we've got another one from Luke of, if you could buy any printer, which one would it be?
Probably the Mark Forge metal printer. I've been looking into that very, very recently, although it's really expensive, so I'm not sure I'll be getting that anytime soon.
It's good to dream big. And we've got one more question from Elle of, what's the best thing that you've printed?
Oh, best thing I've printed. Ooh. I'd probably say the filament rack. That's been a really, really fun project because I was not allowed to drill any holes in the walls because we've got really thin walls. So I had to find a place in my room that was suitable to just hold it on. So I found some holes in the top of a wardrobe and just slotted bolts in. So it's more of I had to draw up my whole room in SolidWorks that took at least a week so I could model where it looked best. So that probably took the most time and was the most fun, definitely.
Great. And we've got another one from Ybot Games. A quick question. What was the first part that you ever printed?
Oh, so when you first get the printers, they come with your little SD card, such as this one. And on the SD card, there are a few test prints. So I started printing on the Annette downstairs and just got it going. Thought, okay, let's go for it. And yeah, they give you about 500 grams of filament, and that wasn't enough. So essentially, I printed half of a pyramid. That was it. The first print ever. It's really interesting to watch, though, to get an understanding for it.